Hello and welcome to Beyond the Paradigm. My guest today is former Metropolitan Police Detective John Wedger. Just like to offer my apologies before this episode starts. As you will notice from the beginning of the episode, John's camera angle is set at a weird angle, but he does correct this partway through the interview, so hopefully it won't spoil your enjoyment of this episode. And if you do like this episode, please can I ask you first of all to like it? And if you do enjoy content like this, please subscribe to the channel. Well, it always is a pleasure to welcome a first-time guest, and it is a real pleasure to welcome you to the show, John.
It's an absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, it is a real pleasure. And as we're just chatting a little bit there, as I was telling you that obviously my audience are from around the world, and one of the things that they will be familiar with is the Epstein case. And probably a lot of them will be less familiar with a lot of the things that have gone on over the years in this part of the world, particularly Jimmy Savile was a big one. But you're a former, obviously, detective from the Metropolitan Police. So just tell my audience, because this is the first time you're on here, just a little bit about your background and sort of how you got into policing, and then your journey to, you know, what you're doing now as you're a whistleblower.
Yeah. I do apologise for if there's any background noise. If you can see, I'm just by the River Thames. I'm right in the heart of the iconic Tower of London, where they used to imprison monarchs for treason. So that's quite relevant, I think. I'm very well known in the UK. I've got a bit of a global following. But what we got to understand is society, global society, is in stratas. And I could be in one strata and everyone knows me. I could be in another one, no one knows me. So it is prudent that I give a brief sort of synopsis of who I am and what I stand for. I'm a retired Metropolitan Police Scotland Yard detective. I specialised in child abuse investigations, vice investigation, anything really to do with the sex industry, sexual abuse and things like that. And it's very unique sphere of working, because most criminalities, a lot, globally, people watch these crime documentaries and it's all about dishonesty, and violence. But sex crime is totally and utterly different, because a lot of crime is born out of poverty and necessity and learnt behaviour and things like that. But sexual crime is totally different, because sex crime is based on the emotional self, the damaged child within, really. And they come from every single strata of society. They come from every single ethnic background, every single economic background. So when people go, oh, you don't get paedophiles in, maybe, say, for instance, a Muslim faith or Judaism, it's absolute rubbish. It's a lie. It's a nonsense. Do not be fooled by it. They're everywhere. And with paedophilia, it's like a hot knife through the butter of society. And this is where you get paupers knowing kings. And you, unlike any other sort of criminality, you get it here. And also the thing with paedophilia is it's got huge blackmail value. Now, I'm what's classed as a whistleblower. And that's a term for someone who stands up and speaks out about wrongdoing, institutional wrongdoing, which is what I did. I stood up and spoke out about the institutional wrongdoing regarding not just the police, Scotland Yard, the most iconic police force globally. It's a benchmark for policing excellence throughout the world. And it is, in fact, the inception of policing as we know it in the Western, globally, really. And I stood up and spoke out about not just the police's, but the British government's deliberate cover-up of what's termed as child sexual abuse. I don't like these terms because I think they're politically motivated. I call it child prostitution, the pimping out of children. I do not endorse the term, but it is what it is, right? And we can't sugarcoat this topic. Sorry, by the tidal Thames, I'm in those ones because it's wet and cold out here. We shouldn't be sugarcoating any of this, because this is a topic that no one in society wants, yet it's a topic that we should all be having. 80% of the UK's prison population, male population, have come from child abusive backgrounds. In the UK, 80% of those released from prison go into a thing called recidivism, which is reoffending. So it shows the whole criminal justice system doesn't work, but it also shows that if you abuse a child, you're setting them up to a life of crime. And you'll see that throughout the world, the civilized and the uncivilized world. It's only the Nordic countries that take a different approach to rehabilitation when they have an 80% non-offending rate because they deal with the wounded child. And if you take a person that's built up, it's coming up to Christmas. So the analogy is a snowman made up of three balls, as it were, standing prostrate. And at the top, you will have the intellectual self. Underneath, you'll have the physical self. And base there, we've got the emotional self. So if you abuse a child, as many people do, and abuse conservatively, coming out of a study done within the family court system of the United Kingdom, it affects a third of the UK population. Now, I think that's a global representation, to be honest. So it either affects people, and it's a difficult topic to talk about, or 10% of those who have been abused go on to abuse. So obviously there's a reluctance to talk about this because they've got a guilty mindset. And then as a result of abuse, you know, we've got situations such as domestic violence. It comes from abuse. It's control, it's cruelty. And there are many men and women who perpetuate domestic violence and subject their children to it. Of course, they don't want to hear people like me. Of course, they don't. And there is a need to subdue people like me, without a doubt. But it's something that we need to be talking about. And it has global governance, and it also has political influence. And anything that has political influence in civilized society cannot be dealt with by the police. It gets dealt with by the intelligence services.
Yeah.
So this is why we see the encroachment and the influence of our secret services. We saw it more recently with the death of Robert Maxwell, and then the imprisonment of his daughter, Ghislaine Maxwell. You know, Robert Maxwell was an operative, allegedly, of the Israeli intelligence services. And there was rumours that so was Jeffrey Epstein. Okay, so, you know, he couldn't hold people accountable and coerce them if they've been going shoplifting or if they've been punching people in the face in a pub. It'd have no worth. If they've been sticking their genitalia into children, it would have massive, massive blackmail effects. And this is what we've got to be looking at. We've got to be adult in this, right? And when you upset, disrupt, disturb, and abuse a child, intellectually, they can go on to live a very functional and normal life. In fact, they can go on to overachieve, because sometimes there is a need to tell the world who you are. You're not going to be shut up anymore. You've been hurt. No one will ever hurt you again. I'm not an idiot. I'm not useless. I'm not stupid. And there'll be a drive that you don't get from people who've come from a more settled and civilized background. But it's done on a bedrock of hurt. Again, physically. People who have been abused, moreover, sexually abused as a child, they will have a need to show the world who they are. Let me turn this round so I'm more leeward, because I don't really. Is this affecting you, the noise from the background?
No, it's fine, John.
Okay.
I'm not picking it up my end
Oh,
anyway.
right,
So.
right. Okay. Well, I'll go back then. I just didn't want it to be. So I've got, I'll be a bit more windward. So when you've got physical abuse of and sexual abuse and emotional abuse of a child, physically, they can go on to do exceptionally well. They can go on to internalize that pain and say, no one will ever hurt me like I've been hurt. And you get a lot of world champions have come out of pain because it's a driving factor. You've got a lot of people that have passed selection for these elite regiments that have come from tremendous pain. There was quite an interesting documentary that British television did regarding the Falklands War 40 years after the war, where Britain went to war with Argentina and we beat them. And it was really a joint effort, but our special forces really came into their own. And they interviewed these special forces operatives. And out of the 5 they interviewed, 3 of them had came from childhood sexual abuse. 3 out of 5. Wow, what a percentage.
Mm.
And one guy said, I wasn't frightened of dying because I was sexually abused as a child and I died. I was already dead spiritually and emotionally inside anyway. So when you abuse someone, they go on a majority of cases, if they're not treated and given the right healing, to be hurt. And then that hurt goes on for the next 3 generations. So you condemn a society, especially a prison society, to the degree of 80% if you do not address sexual abuse.
Mm.
And has a huge demasculating effect. That's the reason why people have to overmasculate themselves. Okay. And there's something wrong because that is what the third ball in this trilogy, the emotional self, is damaged.
Mm.
The intellectual self can heal and get on. The physical self, we just spoke about that. But the emotional self, it ain't going nowhere. That emotional clock stops at the relevant age of abuse.
Mm.
Now, you try and reason as a grown adult male with a 5-year-old child. You can't reason with them. You hurt a child, you take away their toys. What do? I hate you. I want you to die. You get a petulance, but beyond petulance, there is an inability to intellectually reason.
Mm.
And you take that as a 40-year-old grown man who's physically powerful and intellectually on top of their game. You've got a very, very dangerous person there. And
Yeah.
this is why you get road rage. This is why you get murders. This is why you get this, because the reasoning comes from the damaged emotional self, right? And that's
Mm.
what happens. And because you can't see it, society thinks it's okay. And because someone's got a good job in society, they think it's okay. Because someone goes running and they physically look on top of the game, you think it's okay. But
Mm.
it isn't okay.
No.
And then if you take our elite establishments in the United Kingdom, we call them public schools because of the Public School Act of 17, whatever it was, where it allowed um, children from working class backgrounds to go into fee paying schools. But in America, they call it private schools, and so does the rest of the world. So don't get confused. We call them public schools, right? These are elite fee paying schools. Now, if you take the system only up until recent years that used to operate in these schools, where beatings and buggery were the staple diet of these young boys that were divested from their parents,
Mm.
at the age of 7, right? And they were put in this very, very male environment, which was totally divested from any matriarchal influence, and where canings of the bare bottom by grown men onto young boys' buttocks was commonplace and routine. They had a system called the fagging system, and in America, fag is seen as a homosexual. Maybe it derives from this, where it's the older boys are given disciplinary governance of the younger boys, and they were allowed to whip these young boys. Sex abuse was commonplace, and when you've got young men, you've got a thing called testosterone. And if you abuse these young boys sexually and put them in an all male environment, you get a lot of sexual confusion. And like we say, SHIT rolls downhill.
Mm.
So bullying, it just makes a path for extra bullying.
Yeah.
And they've even done intellectual studies on this and shown that the British public school system was set up to really build the empire. Britain had an empire bar none. There was no other race has built an empire like the British did. The Mongols didn't do it. The Romans didn't do it. The British did it. And the British public school system was based on the Greco-Roman gladiator school system. So we were having very, very damaged emotional people were then fed into the feeder establishments such as Oxford, Cambridge, and then into Sandhurst,
Mm.
which is the world's sort of premier elite military training officer training academy. And these people then went on to push forward the globalization agenda that was the British Empire,
Mm.
and it led to, catastrophe. And the same with our care system, where there was an overzealous attitude of putting young men, young girls, post-war into the care system, where they were sexually abused, they were beaten.
Mm.
The Whether they come from the lower the working classes or the upper and the ruling classes, the outcome was the same.
mm,
They were emotionally damaged individuals, and you can look at society as a whole. This is why we have heroin addiction. This is why we have alcoholism. This is why we have wife beating. This is why we have it. And it's recidivistic.
yeah,
And for 10% degree, it reoccurs.
mm,
One active paedophile can create 200 to 2,000 victims in their lifespan.
mm,
So it's a rotten society. Now, I spoke out because I was on Vice and I uncovered a racket involving children from the care system from the age of 9 to 14 that were being taken out and pimped to grown men and women, but boys and girls. And the police covered it up and
mm.
they threatened me with the loss of my home, my job, and my children if I didn't shut my mouth. And I didn't shut my mouth. And there was a 4-year campaign to imprison me with 9 offences that were going to the Crown Court. They tried to take one of my children into care, and they financially ruined me because they stopped paying me for nearly 3.5 years. So I was really on my arse, as it were.
Mm.
But I continued to speak out, and I used my detective ability, my tradecraft as a specialist interviewer and interrogator, and I went out there and I set up a campaign called Voice for the Voiceless, in which I interviewed those who had no voice, those that were put in the care system, were sexually abused, and then entered into a life of dysfunctionality, abuse, and crime. And I asked them all, why? Why did you do it? And the answer was unanimous. They were sexually abused
Mm.
as a kid. And it exploded. And I'm on the national media a lot now. I'm calling for the Mayor of London to stand down for the cover-ups and for reform and for more safeguarding of kids that are in the care system. Yeah, I'm not egotistical about this. I don't want to be. But I give myself a little pat on the back for being one of the few that stands up, because society does not want people like me speaking out. They don't, because we're dangerous.
I mean, I've worked in 2 different prisons, including a category A prison, and I've been in the army, and I can reiterate and agree with what you say about damaged people, that there's a lot of damaged people in the army, and the highest growing prison population in the UK is males between the ages of 18 and 24, sex offenders.
Yep.
When I
Yep.
was when I was in the prison service, that's what they told us. I mean, I worked generally with general population. Sometimes you had to do cross cover on other wings, and you were saying that these paedophiles are from every sphere of society, and they are. They're from every ethnic background. They're from every sphere of society. They can be from, a broken home, or they can be a barrister, a doctor. They could be a business owner. And these are the type of people that we're dealing with. And I've looked into, obviously, this, what we're going to delve into today, about how this, it's being used as blackmail. Like you said, if someone's been punched in the face at a shoplifting, big deal, so to speak, you can't really blackmail someone with that. But like you said, if they've abused a child and they've got it on video, then they're able to blackmail them. And obviously, which is more commonly known around the world, is this thing which is always on the news about Epstein. And from my investigations into him, it was a Mossad intelligence asset. When you look into the FBI vault and the documents they have on there, it even says in one of them that he is an intelligence asset, because he got a slap on the wrist when he abused, I think it was a 14-year-old girl he was guilty of abusing of, and he was just placed under house arrest. And he also did a little bit of a digging into Edward Heath, because obviously Edward Heath, former prime minister, when he gave up all those fishing rights when we joined the EEC, which is what's now the EU, people couldn't understand why he did that. Well, the rumours were that he was blackmailed by German intelligence because he was a known paedophile. And I did a freedom of information request to the Cabinet Office, and I asked the question. And their response was very interesting. They delayed their original response and they asked for more time. And then when they came back to me, they said their actual response was, so my question was basically, was former Prime Minister Edward Heath a German intelligence asset? And their answer was, in the end, we can't confirm nor deny.
Yeah. Yeah.
So to me, that's a confirmation. And when I appealed it, they said that they were sticking to their original answer of they weren't confirming nor denying. So when like we're saying that this goes right to the top, it goes right to the top. Now, obviously, you was a detective. Tell us sort of so one of the things I've heard you talk about is when you were working, you like sort of specialized, you worked on the canals. Tell us about that.
Well. Let's just. I will do. Let me
Yeah.
just stick with Edward Heath.
Yeah.
Now, Operation Conifer was the police's response to survivors of Edward Heath,
Mm.
which were survivors of rape, mainly male rape. Uh, the bravest officer I've ever met was a man called Mike Veal, the Chief Constable of Wiltshire, where Edward Heath had his parliamentary home. And in the UK law, an offence is investigated by the force where the offence occurs, not where the victim lives. So these offences occurred at the parliamentary home, a county where Edward Heath lived, which was Wiltshire. Now, Mike Veal stood up and spoke out on Sky News and said that we are investigating credible information, multiple victims, and if Ted Heath was alive today, he would definitely be arrested. There was something like 30 victims of rape, and Mike Veal also said that there was evidence that Ted Heath was involved in a thing called satanic ritual abuse.
Yeah.
The British government failed Mike Veal. They curtailed him. The media went on an attack against him, and they ruined one of the best hopes we had of ever getting this abhorrence to light. And no one stood up for him. I met Mike Veal on many occasions, and I've met his staff. And he's the only chief constable who really has a staff that love him. Most chief constables, their staff don't like him. They absolutely loved him. And we, as a collective, we can bellyache all we want in this country. We allowed uh, the last bastion of decency and respect of policing to be attacked by our national media. And that was when we allowed the silencing of Mike Veal. He never recovered from it. We had another officer called Lenny Harper, a senior officer, who went out to investigate not just the rape, but the ritualistic murder of children at a kids' home called Haute de la Garenne in Jersey.
Yeah.
And we stood by and we watched while the media destroyed him, and while the state of Jersey police buried him as well. No matter what we say, we allow this. No one has ever pushed for a public inquiry as to why we never got resolved on Haute de la Garenne or Ted Heath. And I tell you why, because the public are cowards and they don't stand by those who boldly and stoically, like true leaders, stand up and out the truth. And out the truth. Epstein, do you know what annoys me? They're going about Epstein. Well, do you know what? America, right, it's nothing compared to the UK. The UK is a tail that wags the American dog. Right? Do not underestimate the fallen empire that was the British Empire. We had this with Elm Guest House. Yeah. We had our elite were mentioned and we just let it go. We let it go. We have members of parliament named in a gay juvenile paedophilic brothel on the south bank of the Thames, and nothing was ever pushed forward. And those who spoke out were classed as conspiracy theorists. Yeah. One of the paedophile elite attendees of Elm Guest House, where young boys were taken from the care system, placed into this brothel and abused, was a man called Nicholas Fairbairn. Nicholas Fairbairn was a lord, a laird. He was in charge of the justice system for Scotland. He was the advocate depute. Any case of severity had to go through this man's sticky paedophile fingers. There was a kids' home called Forneathie in Perthshire, in rural Scotland. England is the second most densely populated country, bar Malta, in Europe. Scotland is the second least populated country. When it's rural in Scotland, it's rural. They took young girls into what's deemed respite care from the West Coast, the working class West Coast, the Strathclyde area, right? And Glasgow, which is some of the most deprived areas back then of Europe. Glasgow had the highest murder rate in the Western world up until 5 years ago, right? These girls were put into these care homes in rural Perthshire, but with no method of getting home, and they were sexually abused. There is a case going through the Scottish Crown Court at the moment where the ex-head mistress has been found guilty of 18 offences of neglect and abuse of children. Out of 20 victims of child prostitution, girls that were pimped out by this woman, taken to a posh manor house where they were systemically abused by what they class as very wealthy white men, right? Out of 20, 15 of them picked out Nicholas Fairburn as being their rapist. At that time, Nicholas Fairburn was having a long-standing affair with a woman called Esther Ranson. Esther Ranson run the biggest child protection charity called Childline, right? Again, where is the outrage? We all scream outrage because of America, because it's America, it's sexy, it involves P. Diddy and dysfunctional morons like that. Where's the outrage when it's England? We always overlook England, Scotland, and Wales. Yet we've had this. So don't people point the finger at America, this is injustice, when you've seen it go on in the national media in this country and you dismissed it. Shame on the lot of you, because we've had it all. We've had it all in greater intensity. And how many of them survivors went on to a lifetime of heroin addiction, dysfunctional parenting, resulting in their kids being put into care and then suffering the same fate as them, and then suicide. Do you know something, my friend? One of the greatest risks of a child to be sexually abused in their own home is what? It's the presence of a step parent.
Yeah.
80% of all abuse, sexual abuse, goes on in the home. Let's stop pointing a finger at these big institutions like Epstein Island. Let's stop pointing a finger at people's homes where they are raping their own children. And once a child is raped in their own home, they're 6 times more likely to be trafficked out to the county lines and the grooming gangs and things like that. So we're always looking at these big ogres that are Epstein Island. We never localise it. And we never localise it to the local police constabularies that covered it up, the local councils that did nothing about it and wouldn't put police resources into child protection, and the social services who did nothing. And we can all glamorise it and, and idolise it in America. Come on, we've had this over here. And it's misery. And it's misery. And people need to wake up and realise it's going on under your own noses, people. Not in posh Caribbean islands, under your own effing noses, Sorry for the rant there, my brother, but it needs to be said.
Yeah. No, it's an epidemic. I mean, I remember where I used to live in northwest of England before I moved. I remember one night, police pulling up on the street and them going into the house across the road. And so me and my wife went upstairs and we were watching through the window. And as soon as they brought the computer out, we knew
Yeah,
what it
of
was
course,
for.
yeah.
The guy who got arrested in the end, the first prison I ever worked in, he got sent to that. And his was for child abuse. And there was historical cases apparently that he got away with and he'd moved out the area. So like you said, yeah, it's not just over there on Epstein
No,
Island. It's localized. It's happening right now in the areas you live in. And like you said, the percentage chance of abuse taking place in the home is massively increased when there's a step parent. And unfortunately, we're living in a society that's broken, and there's a lot of those types of families,
of course.
which is now obviously snowballing the cases of abuse. Hence why 18 to 24-year-old males is the fasting growing, population in prison, and obviously there's an epidemic of
And
pornography.
and I was asked about Pakistani grooming gangs. I said, not in London. The Pakistanis were grooming kids, like all of them. The biggest ethnic grouping that were doing it were Jamaican yardies. People think they're trendy. They're called the yardies. The yardies, these were grown Jamaican men having sex with 9-year-old girls in crack houses. We don't hear about that. But, we point the finger at a certain demographic and we don't look at what happened in ecclesiastical settings with priests. In America, they sent 4,000 priests under investigation for paedophilia from Southern Ireland to America, a good percentage of them went on to reoffend all throughout the East Coast,
Yeah.
destroying lives. And what did the church do about it? They covered it up. Nothing was done about it.
Mm.
We see it everywhere, all over the place. It's totally and utterly consistent. And we look at Epstein. Well, what about Sir Peter Heyman,
Mm.
in charge of our intelligence, MI6 services, convicted sex offender of children? Sir
Mm.
Peter Heyman. We've had 5 PAs, political assistants, to 5 consecutive prime ministers that we were accused of or convicted of child abuse. We've had home secretaries that were under investigation many times for child abuse.
Yeah.
Had home secretaries that have hidden files.
Mm.
Leon Britton hid files. Theresa May hid files of child abuse. Each one was a victim. Theresa May hid something like 144 files. And each one was a victim of rape, child rape.
Mm.
So, it's all about blackmail. It's all about the broken child. It's about perversion. It's perpetuated by the media. It's perpetuated by the music industry, by television. We've got to stop idolizing.
Mm.
We've got, I could now, I'd be libelous if I did it, name a really well-known English comedy actor. And everyone thinks he's brilliant. Well,
Mm.
it will come out either posthumously or
Yeah.
it'll come out beforehand, who is a horrific abuser of children, a footballer who everyone thinks is brilliant, 2 footballers,
Mm.
right? And I could mention them now, but it would be a world of trouble for you and for me, so I'm not going to do it, and it wouldn't achieve nothing.
Yeah.
But people, they call it idolatry. They align themselves with these people, and therefore they don't think they can do any wrong. But they're
Yeah.
perverts. They're
Yeah.
perverts.
I mean, you mentioned there, obviously, a comedian. Now, I've heard that there is another what is deemed untouchable out there of the level of Savile that at some point, probably posthumously, is going to come out.
Yeah.
Sadly, that it's going to be posthumously because, well, I say sadly. I mean, as a Christian, I believe in final justice anyway. So, but I mean, sadly for us not to be able to see that person brought to justice in this world right now.
Well, I'm the same. I'm a born again Christian. I
Yeah.
witnessed a miracle, and I realised that it is our Saviour Jesus Christ. And I pray in a group, and I pray privately, and I pray for Satanists, and I pray that Satanists stop worshipping a liar,
Mm.
a God that's going to deceive them, and start speaking up and telling the truth because they're people in pain. I
Yeah.
have Satanists contact me, and they say, "Look, we actually like what you do." Uh, and I said, but why the Satanism? Because it's about revenge. They want revenge, and they think God abandoned them, but He didn't abandon them.
No.
And we're going to see that this satanic worship is probably a staple to a lot of the abuse and the cover-ups. Ultimately,
100%.
there's a thing called the RAINS list. It's an acronym: Ritual Abuse Information Network Support, written by a woman called Dr. Joan Coleman. And I implore your many viewers and listeners to this podcast to look up RAINS, the acronym Satanic List. And it's a who's who of British hierarchy, the entertainment industry, the judiciary. My old boss, there's a guy on there, he's named on it. His name is Michael Hames. He's named on it. It's public information. I'm not doing nothing wrong. A senior policeman is named as being an active participant in Satanism. Why has nothing ever been done? I wrote to the IOPCC about this guy. I wrote to the Home Secretary about this guy. Please, can he be looked into? Because if these claims are true, this man is culpable of
Mm.
serious wrongdoing, and he should not be languishing with a pension at the public expense if this is true in a Christian nation. Never got a response. Never got a response. The Chief Constable of Hampshire Police is named on there. There are actors, there are politicians, and
Mm.
nothing is ever done. Nothing. But
Mm.
you know what? Every one of us is going to take our last breath. Now, my goal, my end game, is that I did all I could to expose the evil that is Satanism, and
Mm.
to take people to our Savior Jesus Christ. I hold baptisms, and I have a guy who's now an ordained minister. He's an ex-convicted murderer. Well, he didn't do the murder, but he was an accessory to one of the most infamous murders in the UK, that of a guy called Jack the Hat McVitie, by the well, the most abhorrent criminals going, the Cray twins. I've got no time for these people. But this guy was supposedly a member of their firm, a guy called Chris Lambriano. He's probably one of the closest friends I got. And between the two of us, we take people to the Lord. And we baptized a guy the other day from your part of the world, a guy that was feared on the street, a guy by the name of Stephen French,
Yeah, I know.
aka the devil.
Yeah.
He's gone to Jesus.
Mm.
You know, if Stephen French can do it, you know, my words, you know,
Yeah.
many can, and there is salvation in it. But these people, they seek fame, they seek fortune, they seek it in any conduit they can. They're hurt, they're in pain, they want revenge, and they think that Satanism and other idolatry is the answer, but it's not.
No.
It's a lie. It is a lie.
Mm.
And that momentary pleasure is soon gone. And the material wealth is soon gone. You can't take it with you.
No.
You know, but you've got to look inside yourself. Are you hurting?
Mm.
You know, is there a sense of injustice? Well, God can feel that. And I don't want to make this about a Bible preaching thing, but ultimately, this is a binary issue of good versus evil.
Of course it is. Well, this is a Christian podcast anyway, John. So most of my listeners, not all of them, a lot of them are Christians. So I talk about a lot of this stuff. I mean, satanic ritual abuse. People have no idea. Like, there's things I know that have been going on, and they've been going on for centuries. Like Solomon said, there's nothing new under the sun.
No,
These things are happening and they're real, but your everyday person on the street, they cannot take it on board. They will not take it on
no,
board, and they'll refuse to. And like you said, it's idolatry. You know, their favorite pop star, they can't believe that they will do that, or their favorite sports star or whatever. And the reality is, they don't understand human nature. So people are broken, and there is a lot of broken people inside. And yeah, but what's happening is this abuse is stirring up the sinful nature which is already within us from our first parents, Adam and Eve. We inherited from them. And then you've got, obviously, not everyone's as bad as they could be. There's levels, isn't there? There's different levels of
yeah,
evil. And unfortunately, what we're talking about now is some of the higher echelons of evil where these people are, abusing children in various ways sexually. And sometimes, I mean, I've said to people in the past, it is perversion, but there's more to it than that,
but
especially with the
I'll tell you
abuse.
what. I'll tell you what is, my brother. I was at a sports day for my granddaughter.
Mm,
And in the UK, we have these events at the end of the year in the summer where kids compete in sports. And my
mm,
granddaughter is in the juniors. I think she's 7 years old this year, 6 years old, but she's a little athlete. And she said, Granda, please come. I want you to be there. So I went, I'll be there, don't worry. So I turned up at this sports day and watching these kids doing the races. And she was doing her little sprinting race. And, and she was like a little bullet.
mm,
She
mm,
won the thing. And my son was there, and the girl's mum was there, and a few family members were there. And they looked round at me, and I was on the floor crying. I was beyond, I don't know what, consoling, to be honest. And my son said, Dad, what's the matter? What's the matter? And I said, look, it's okay, I'm good. I'll tell you afterwards. And do you know what it was? It hit me. It hit me watching these kids compete, and it was the purest form of energy called innocence.
yeah.
It was innocence. And it hit me that this is innocence.
Mm,
And these predators, they prey and they suck up that innocence. So
mm,
when we look at these people, we hold no quarter for them.
no.
Because in the book of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, it says, anyone that makes the young ones fall away from me, it is better that they put a millstone around their neck and
Yeah.
jump into the depths of the sea.
Mm,
Now, I get people contact me and they're angry at me because of my Christian stance. And they
mm,
say to me, John, I was abused. I was raped as a child.
mm,
Where was your Lord Jesus Christ when I was being raped? And of course, it's a tricky one to answer. And what's happened to these people is they've fallen away from God.
mm,
And their answers come in the form of paganistic abuse,
mm,
crystal healing,
mm,
shamanic healing, and ultimately Satanism, because Satanism has a huge revenge element to it. And the Satanist rang me up and he said, I love what you do. I was one of them children. But unfortunately, your Jesus was not there when I was being raped.
mm,
But Satan was. And I do rituals of revenge against my abusers.
mm,
And I want to do a witch's moat for you for protection. I said, no, 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 not in my name. Please, not in my name. I understand the concept of what you're going on about, but I do not agree with it.
mm,
I do not agree with it. I get where they're coming from, but these people have fallen away from God
mm.
because of pain and hurt. And you're a former prison officer, and you would have been surrounded by a thing called anger. And
Yeah.
anger is trauma.
Mm,
And there's a hatred for their mother because she wasn't there to protect them.
mm,
She allowed these monsters in that hurt them, and she did nothing.
mm,
And then they hate the man for the homosexual paedophilic abuse that they encountered.
mm.
And it's hatred and anger and a need for revenge.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, they blame Jesus for it. But Jesus
Yeah.
walks with you. He walks with you. He feels every single pain that you go through. And these people that have committed these offences, wow, wow, they have no idea what
No,
awaits them.
no.
No idea.
When people, obviously people always say that, where was God when this happened?
Yeah,
Where was God when that happened? Why doesn't God deal with evil?
yeah,
Well, when he did deal with evil, when he told the Israelites to wipe the Canaanites out, people have a problem with that. When he flooded the earth, they have a problem with that. So when he
yeah,
does deal with evil, people have a problem with it. But I've often said to people, you point the finger at other people and say, why didn't God deal with this person? Well, what happens if he deals with me or you for our sins
yeah,
instantly?
yeah, yeah.
Not one of us will be left.
Well, we
Not
will, we
one.
will, we will fall far from the grace of God. We do it all the time. I've done it today. I've sinned today. I wish I had. And listen, Jesus Christ, I'm going to show you something. Jesus Christ knew about slavery, and he knew that when they indebted people in a thing called usury, they've got slaves for life.
Mm,
How many people have lost their lives because they can't pay their mortgage? They can't feed their family and they kill themselves. And these bankers make a fortune.
mm,
Jesus Christ didn't go and rebuke them. He got knotted rope that he wet in salted water and he whipped them.
yeah.
Because not only were they charging interest on a loan, which in Islam is called haram,
Mm,
it's contrary to God's law, it's
of
contrary
course
to
it is.
Christianity.
Yeah.
Judaism allows it. I'm not bashing no religion because it's a dangerous thing to do. But Jesus warned us. And the other thing they were doing, they were sacrificing doves for money lending, for Baal worship,
Mm,
right? This is the contempt that these bankers still have for us now.
yeah.
They knew what our Lord Savior, they knew the power, because this is an attack on one thing, an attack on Christianity and the word of God,
Mm,
right? Look at this card. This is a credit card. Let me
mm,
show you. Let me show you on there. Look,
mm,
there's a dove. Even to
yeah.
this day, they're mocking our
Mm,
Savior, saying
yeah.
no matter what he did, we're still doing what he fought against. They're
Mm,
still doing it. They're still pushing it on us. And this endless pursuit of money. And you've only got to look at the rap artists, how they sort of ingratiate themselves with, you know, $10,000 chinchilla coats,
mm,
and the lust for money, the flicking of the money and the big cars. I've got neighbours that East European, they're Romanian gypsies, and they had some rap music on, and it was the same as the rap scene in America. It was all about prostituting women, making money,
mm,
material wealth,
mm,
and it means everything to these people.
yeah.
And
Which it's all temporal. It's just temporal.
it's yeah, it is, and we're seeing it all around. But do you know what? It's down to us to say no, it's not happening.
Mm,
It's down to us to stand up and say it ain't happening. You know, I'm writing a book called Ironic, and it's just dawned on me. I have seen your podcast. I know you are now. Um, I do apologise. It's dawned on me what you've been through. And my when I was in trouble in the police, I nearly went to prison, and I believe you went to prison, didn't you?
No, I've
Did you go?
worked in prison.
Oh, you worked in prison. Oh,
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
Oh, right. I'm mistaking you for a prison officer who went away.
yeah.
I'm
No,
mistaken.
that's not me.
No,
No.
right. Now, I nearly went to prison on nine false allegations. I won't go into it. It's in my testimony.
Yeah.
And I thought, what happens if I go to prison? I've got children. I was a single parent. I think my children are going to be taken off me. I'm going to go into this brutal environment, and I've done nothing wrong. All I did was stand up for kids.
Mm,
That's all I've done. And I put my faith in God. A miracle occurred to me, and that really consolidated my path. And one day I'm walking past a church, and there's a bang on the window, and there's a Jamaican pastor um, calls me, and he said, "I need to talk to you." And he said, "Son, what are you involved in?" I said, "Oh, I don't know what he meant." I said, "I don't know. Doing my own little thing, trying to sort of expose wrongdoing and everything else." He went, "No, John." He said, "There's something else going on here, mate." He said, "Are you exposing things?" I went, "Yeah, yeah." He said, "Are you a born again Christian?" And I went, "Are you baptized?" I went, "Yeah, yeah, I'm baptized. I'm a Catholic." He went, "Well, that ain't going to save you." And he said, "Someone's going to get in touch. Give me your number. Someone to get in touch." And the guy got in touch with me, a guy called Brian Knox. Good guy to have on your channel, actually, Brian Knox, a former gangster from Scotland.
mm,
If you're talking about hard man, he's a hard man. He's got a big scar down his face. Dangerous man in his day, former Royal Marine, martial artist, but a dangerous, dangerous, dangerous gangster. He's now a minister. Brian Knox, he baptized me in the sea, right? I was baptized in the sea by Brian and another guy called Martin. Martin is a former heroin addict, you know. So I got an ex-gangster, ex-heroin addict baptizing me into the kingdom of heaven. I then start working with Chris Lambriano, and a convicted murderer, taking people into the kingdom of heaven. I then got contacted by a group, and they were gypsies. They
mm.
were the Romany Gypsy Irish Traveller Association, and they invited me to fellowship on the gypsy site. I hated gypsies. I thought they were a no good race of liars and thieves. They went on to become my best friends. You know, Jesus has a way of humbling you.
Yeah.
And do you know what happened? Only two police officers ever stood by me and stood up and spoke and did the right thing. Two police officers out of the thousands I knew, only two. But gypsies, former prostitutes, heroin addicts, gangsters, they did stand by me,
Mm,
and they did. And they stood by me with total loyalty. And, you know, if anyone says God hasn't got a sense of humor, wow. I did work with a guy called John Ramirez in America. John Ramirez, a former warlock. You know,
mm,
have you
mm.
come across John Ramirez?
And yeah, I know the name. I have heard some of his stories. Yeah.
Yeah, I can put you in touch with him. You know, a former Santeria priest.
Mm,
You know, and things like that went on and on and on, and you know, it was edifying, and realised that our God is not a God of judgment. You know, He's a God of deeds. He's not a God of words. He's a God of deeds.
mm,
You know, and now is a time we're in very, very precarious times.
yeah.
We're in times like never before, and we need to stand up and speak out.
Mm,
And I implore victims and survivors of abuse, stand up and name your abuser. Speak out.
mm,
Yours is not the shame to carry. You did nothing wrong.
mm,
They did it to you.
yeah.
Speak out. And I implore officers of the law from whatever country, stand up and speak out about wrongdoing regarding child abuse.
Mm,
Social workers, child protection services, speak out. And I call out to paedophiles, stop it. Stop doing it. Your time is short.
mm,
Do not go to your grave with them sins. You do what is right. You have a thing called redemption. You speak out about what you've done and what those around you are doing. You assist law enforcement and you put an end to it.
yeah.
And ultimately, Satanists. Satanism is veiled in this country.
Yeah.
Anyone who speaks up against it is persecuted, prosecuted, defamed, and belittled.
Mm,
Right? We need Satanists to speak out and say this does go on.
mm,
This is where we do it, and this is what we do.
mm,
Because you too, your time is short.
Yeah.
You are worshipping a defeated God.
Mm.
He's lost. He was a liar from the start.
Yeah.
Do not go to eternity worshipping
No.
that monster. Don't do it.
And the thing is with sin, so we're talking about like really horrific sin here, we're talking about child abuse. But what I want to say to people is this, and this is important to grasp a hold of, because the devil, like you said, is a liar, and he'll want to trap you in despair, which is a wicked sin, because it's from the seed of unbelief. So the seed is unbelief, despair is it in full flower. But he wants you to believe that your sins are too big, and they're
Yep,
not.
yep. And
Jesus' his sacrifice is it's able to cover every sin of every person who's ever lived. Every sin. We need to let that sink in. I'm talking about every single one, including paedophilia.
yeah, and incest.
Yeah.
There are men and women that have committed incest
Mm,
against the ones that are meant to protect their own children.
yeah.
Stop it and go to Jesus.
Mm,
There is forgiveness, but you need to put right what you've done wrong.
mm,
You need to do it, and you can end this and it stops. When you abuse your children, you don't just abuse them, you rip out their soul and you rip out the next three generations. It says it biblically, it says it in social services doctrines, and it says it in legal doctrines. You destroy society for the next three generations before healing begins.
mm,
And I say to society, in order for there to be healing, we need justice. And
mm,
to every legal department, you must put children first. They cannot take the side thing on this. They've got to be put as number one priority. And then your society will heal. You will see your murder rate plummet.
mm.
You will see drug addiction almost become non existent. And child abuse, sexual abuse will stop. Single parenting will stop. Healing will start to begin in a heartbeat.
Mm.
And we can do it. It's in our grasp. But we must turn away from all of this sin,
Yeah.
and we must do, and stop listening to the lie.
Yeah.
Stop listening to it. And when you go to Jesus, you police yourself. It's not what the government see you doing. Epstein may have got away with it. Donald Trump may have got away with it, or may get away with it, whatever he has or hasn't done. All
Mm.
these celebrities like P. Diddy, they might not really get the right justice, but they will one day take their last breath.
Yeah.
And they can't run from that. None of
No.
them. No
No.
matter who their big brother is. I'm not scared of British intelligence. I'm not scared of an ex-soldier contracted to take me out. I'm not scared. I hold no fear for these people. People say to me, "You're not frightened." No, I'm not. I'm frightened of going to hell. I don't
Mm.
want to go to hell. I want to go to my grave knowing I did everything to expose evil.
Mm.
And that's that. And I am not frightened of no man. No way. No way. I don't want to be disabled. I don't want to leave my children fatherless. I don't. But life's life,
Mm.
you know, and that's that. But look, I need to dash now because I've got to
Yeah,
be
that's
somewhere.
fine.
But I'm so grateful for your platform.
Yeah.
I really am.
No,
And
it's been brilliant talking to you, John. Thanks for the time that you've given me. I'd love to get you back on another time when
uh,
maybe,
yeah,
you've got a little bit more
yeah,
time. We'll
give me an evening slot and I'll do an evening slot from 7:30 onwards. Anytime you want me, I'll be there for you.
Yeah, no problem. I'll definitely do that. So guys, obviously what we've been talking about today with John is really important stuff. And John has given us some of his time today. He's a busy man. So that's it for this interview today. So John, thank you again. And I will be definitely back in contact. And I will be back next week, guys. And I'm Paul. This is Beyond the Paradigm.